Welcome to The Voice of Counseling, presented by the American Counseling Association. This program is hosted by Dr. S. Kent Butler. This week's episode is Antiracist Counseling in Schools and Communities and features Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy.
Welcome to The Voice of Counseling from the American Counseling Association. I'm Dr. S. Kent Butler, and joining us today is Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy. Cheryl is a Dean of School of Education and a professor at the American University in Washington, D.C. She is an ACA fellow and is actively working to develop an anti-racist curriculum for teachers in training. Will you all help me welcome Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy?
Hey, Kent, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And by the way, congratulations on such a wonderful and momentous appointment of election as ACA president. I'm just elated for you and for all of us that we get to be a part of your presidency. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, we've been, I guess you can call partners in crime for many, many years since our start in the American Counseling Association. And I'm just excited to be a part of your life, seeing you do the things that you've been doing, especially with regards to school counseling. You then becoming a dean, you elevated yourself to the point where we're like, oh, if Cheryl is becoming a dean, we need to be looking at what we're doing as well. And I'm excited to talk to you today about your upcoming book that's titled Anti-Racist Counseling in Schools and Communities. So this is going to be a phenomenal hour. And I'm just excited to kind of be able to talk with you. So wow.
Me too. It is. And it's a phenomenal, well, I guess you can say this is a moment in history that just everything that's happening in our world right now, it calls for, I think, not only innovative thinking, but revolutionary thinking. And, you know, as I said about your presidency, what you're doing and your thoughts and ideas about where the counseling profession can go. I can't think of a better leader for right now. And that is what this book is all about. It's about this moment. And what does this mean for us? We can no longer be counseling status quo, what we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years. This book is about challenging us as a profession to rethink, not even rethink. Let's back up, not rethink. We need to dismantle and get rid of old practices that just perpetuate the status quo. So that's what this is all about. It's about this moment in time and just really challenging us as counselors to do the right thing and to get rid of some of those old practices that just perpetuate racist systems and oppressive behaviors.
So is this what led you into, from being a school counselor, becoming a counselor educator, now being a dean? Has this been kind of your roadmap to this type of awakening for anti-racism? How do you see yourself getting here?
That's a good question. It was not a roadmap. I did not set out to become a dean. Actually, I did not set out to become a professor. And I did everything possible not to become an educator. And I don't think people understand. My parents, both of my parents were educators. I grew up in a family of educators and ministers, you know, so it was either you became a teacher or you became a minister, or, and for women that left us, you know, you become a teacher. My mother was a counselor. She was a member of the old APGA, the Association for Personnel Guidance and Association. My very first conference, professional conference, was with my mother.
Wow.
And so she finished Hampton University, HU, and became a long-term counselor until her retirement. My father was a principal, but I didn't want to, I wanted to do something different.
Okay.
But when my father, helped me to get a summer job, and I worked with a group of second graders that were behind in their reading, And I did a lot of tutoring that summer of this group. It was a small group of 5 or 6 second graders. And I just fell in love with this process of helping them and helping them overcome this barrier of learning how to read. And it just then became like, I'm good at this. I love it. And I want to do more of it. So I became a teacher, and I became a kindergarten teacher. I went back and became a counselor. And the point of an interesting fact is that when I went back to the University of Virginia as a counseling student, Cortland Lee was in his first year of being a counselor educator at the University of Virginia, and took my first multicultural counseling course from Cortland during his first year at the University of Virginia. So yeah, so it was, this roadmap, it was just sort of accidental. Things just sort of fell in place. And I tend to believe that my purpose in life is to do what I'm doing. And it's not so much as a roadmap as much as it is follow where your career leads you. Yeah. And wanting to do the right thing.
It's funny because I think that that's kind of similar to my pathway as well. I was doing all this work in counseling that led me to become a counselor, then become a counselor educator. So I can see like similar pathways in regards to that. Yeah. So what was it like following in like the footsteps of your mom? You said your mom was a counselor. So what was that like?
My mother, wonderful. And every day I think about my mom every day, and every day I realize how many pearls of wisdom, she was giving me along the way. And I, didn't understand it, but I understand it now. And my mother was, before we started talking about cultural competence and issues of equity and, anti-racism, my mother grew up in the South, Jim Crow South in Virginia. And, this was her lived experience. So her notion to fight racism was a natural part of her. And my mother was not afraid. I mean, she used to just speak up and speak her mind. And I'll never forget, at her funeral, many of her students came forward and say, if it were not for your mother, I would not have gone to college. I would not have done this. And so it was her life work. I see myself as continuing her work, but just in a different time. And with the beauty of having, these pearls of wisdom that she gave me along the way. So I think about that every day. But it was kind of, again, like every kid, you don't want to be like your mom. You're sort of like, no, I'm different. But there's so many similarities between what we both value and valued in life and in our life's work. So I'm proud of the fact that I'm a lot like her.
That's really nice. That's a great tribute to her as well, because in following in her footsteps, you've been able to, and I think this is what most parents want for their children, right? They want us to surpass even the greatness that they've been able to do and obtain. And so you being a dean, you having this new book that's coming out shortly, showcases that, you not only learned the lessons that she was teaching you, you were able to then go and move forward and do those same things in your own career. And not only that, you're a mentor. You have brought people along with you. You say, and you give the shout out to Cortland Lee, but in a very real sense, Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy, ACA fellow, has been out there doing the work as well. And so, I'm so proud of the work that you have been doing.
Thank you.
Because I feel like we're brothers and sisters in counseling.
We are.
Because when we met and we just started to hang out and get to know one another. And one of the things that you always do, and then I don't know if this is part of your nature because of how you were raised or just because, you just being Cheryl, but you always, always, always give people like, I guess, kind of a gratitude or a kind of, I watched you grow. I've seen you do this work. I've seen something that you put through, and helping them to stay balanced and I guess on top of their game. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when we meet, you're saying, well, Ken, and one of the things that you will always say to me was, Ken, I saw how you did this or you did that. And I'm like, wow, Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy is watching what I've done. And then that kind of inspires me to continue doing the work that I'm doing. And so, you know, what is that? Where did you get that? And you know,
I think that isn't that just good counseling? I mean, that's what when we talk about empowerment, strengths-based counseling, when we, you know, counseling to me is not just all in a session, right? Where you're sitting there, and it's about you know, giving people what they need, the fuel that they need to keep going. And that happens all the time. I mean, that can be just meeting someone down the hall and noticing them.
okay.
And I see that as being a part of, you know, the work that I have done around cultural competence and counseling. And I have written a lot about that. A part of being culturally competent is being able to, you know, help people feel empowered. You know, I can't empower Kent, but I surely can say those things that will help you feel more empowered to do. And so
it helps with your self-efficacy.
Yeah, it's all about.
It definitely helps with your self-efficacy,
Yeah,
because it's like,
I can do it. Yeah.
You know, I like, because you know, you can publish things and you can do certain things. You can say certain things in public spaces, but you know, you don't have that confidence that everything that you're saying is really thriving. And then you see somebody who's accomplished come back and say something to you about something that you've done. And it's like, okay, well, maybe there is something about this. And, you know, most people don't know this, but, you know, you and I communicate pretty often. And I call you on purpose sometimes to get that Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy wisdom in terms of, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And you've always been able to kind of, you know, if you can't answer, you know, I'll call you right back or whatever have you, and you do. And so there's something about being there for one another in regards to helping us move forward, because it's difficult as an African American to navigate these circles.
And we need that, right? I mean, just like you say, I do that for you, but you also do that for me. And we reciprocate that. I mean, we need that. I don't care how strong one might appear to be to others, but we all have that need to feel like you're doing the right thing, that it's okay. When you called me and you said, well, I didn't get the presidency this time, remember I told you, you're bigger than the presidency of ACA. You don't need ACA to validate you as a human being, as a person. You know, ACA is lucky to have you. And you are far beyond the organization, the great work that you're doing for the students at UCF, the wonderful things that you do for your family, and the thousands of students that you have touched, either in a classroom or through your writings. It goes far beyond, you know, a presidency. And I just wanted you to know that, right? But sometimes we need those people that remind us that, you know, that sometimes, you know, what we, you know, it's not just this little narrow thing, it's much larger. And we need that, both of us, you know, everybody needs that.
So I think what you're talking about too is like community.
Community. Yeah. It sounds so simple, but not everyone, but it's so difficult. And sometimes it's hard because not everyone is as fortunate as we are, you know, to be able to make it to an ACA conference. We would get together, see each other, hang out, you know, talk about our lives as, you know, tenure track professors, then tenured professors. And, you know, this notion of needing someone is something that we all need. No matter what, we need someone that will ground us and remind us of, you know, that we're much bigger than an organization or that one class where, oh, I think I messed up in that class. It's larger than that.
Right. It's about the intent behind all the work that you're doing and what you're hoping to get accomplished. So Cheryl, I think when we first met was through ACA, through the conferences early on in our career. And we got to know one another by hanging out at the conference, of course, but also recognizing what each other were doing in school counseling, because we both come from a school counseling background. And one of the things I've noticed in your career was that you always help people along. You brought people with you with regards to the work that you were doing, but also the work that your students were doing and the work that your colleagues were doing. What was that like for you, especially when you think about how your mother entered you into the counseling world? What was the importance of you bringing people along with you once you got started?
Well, I mean, I see that as being, just a part of the job. Also, if you really think about it, it's also part of the legacy that I will leave, the people that my students, colleagues who I wouldn't say that I've helped them as much as it is be willing to collaborate with them, that we have shared interests and we kind of come together. I think there's strength in that. And so part of my willingness to, to help students along and to help colleagues, bring colleagues along, I see that as being strength, right? And that I am, weaker if I'm isolated, right? And that there's strength in collaboration, there's strength in numbers. And we're all much better off if all of us move. And so that's always been sort of a philosophy that I live by. That there's, especially in this, area of with, writing about cultural competence, systemic and structural racism in the world, social justice. These are huge, topics. And there's enough of these topics for all of us to take a piece of it, right? And so I've always encouraged others to come along and be a part of the movement. And I see it as a part of a movement, a part of, in our counseling world it's mobilizing people together. And so that's how I see it. There's so much talent in the counseling profession. When I was working at Maryland, the doctoral students that would come to Maryland were so very talented and brilliant people. And I thought, it was sort of like, I was just on for the ride, right? It's just like, come on, let's go. You all are brilliant, these wonderful ideas. This notion of multicultural self-efficacy, I have an instrument around self-efficacy, around multicultural topics. That all came out of a doctoral seminar with these wonderful doctoral students. And they know who they are out there. I mean, just brilliant. And I see my role as just facilitating brilliance, right? And it really is just that's how I see it, that, that we're all better off if these brilliant, emerging scholars blossom. We're all better off. So that's how that was always my philosophy behind my job. And that has had rewards for me. I mean, to see Eric Hines, Paul Harris, Ileana Gonzalez, Carlos Delgado, Hippolito Delgado. I mean, these are brilliant scholars in our field now, and they're doing such wonderful things. And that, to me, brings me great satisfaction, that I could be a part of their journey. And so that's it's really
So one of the things that I always wonder about is, how do we help people who don't get it understand the importance of cultural competence and why we're doing this work, why it's important for us to talk about anti-racism, why it's important for us to really showcase that we belong, right? That we have a right to be at the table. What comes up for you when I say something like that?
How do we get people to come along? And by the way, I didn't mention all the brilliant students that were at Maryland and other places. I didn't go down. There's a long list, Tony DeSato, others. So just wanted folks to not feel left out, because there were many. This notion of changing hearts and minds of people is that was behind my very first dissertation, and only dissertation, in which Jane Myers was my chair. I remember talking to Jane one day and saying, we were trying to figure out, what, happens during this process of becoming culturally competent,
Right.
and trying to figure out developmentally what happens over time. And I remember telling her, because we were studying the different types of activities that people were engaging in to become culturally competent, where they're going to professional development, they had a course, they were engaged in some type of activity where they were enmeshed with other cultures. And, to her, I remember I said to her, this is not going to happen like in the course of 2 years in a counseling program. I mean, people,
Right.
this is a lifelong journey, right? And the only thing we're doing in counseling is really sort of putting some fire under people to find out more, right?
Right.
But
A lifelong learning piece, right?
it's a lifelong learning piece. And I do think we take ebbs and flows depending on what's happening around us, right?
Mhm.
I think, for instance, last summer with the murder of George Floyd, and for many of my white friends who witnessed his murder, 9 minutes on his neck, and they saw that. It was on
Right.
TV over and over again. It was one of those experiences that created this increase in one's cultural understanding of racial justice, right? It was one of these events that the entire world was experiencing together. And probably if I had given my scale to people there, and they would have had an increase, they would have rated themselves higher cultural, racial understanding because of that event.
Right.
But then what happens over time is that if they're not seeing those kinds of events anymore and they're not being reminded, then their level of cultural competence probably goes back into this comfort zone of understanding my own, I don't have to understand my own whiteness anymore. I don't have, I'll just go. So this notion of cultural competence, I believe, has its highs and lows, depending on what's happening to us at that moment. For people of color, our, experiences with being Black, being Latino, being Latinx, being, from a different historically oppressed group, we live with that all the time.
All the time. So
it is a part of our ordinary everyday existence. And that in many ways is what the tension is that you find Black and brown counselors, people saying, I live with this every day. I didn't need the murder of another Black man on the streets of Minneapolis to remind me of issues of racial injustice in this country. And that is the tension often in classrooms and with the work that we're doing around cultural competence, is that our students of color often come in with lived experiences that are quite different from their white colleagues. And as instructors, we're then trying to help our students of color grow in their understanding of what's happening to them, but also white individuals who never had to really understand that they are cultural beings or that they live in a society that has, harbored racial injustices. So it is a very difficult task. I do want to take some time too, as we talk about the book. I can't wait to talk more about the book and why this book is so important, and how is this book different from the books before around cultural competence? Because it really has moved me into this different place.
Good. We'll get there, definitely get there. Because I think that part of a book like this sometimes scares people, right? Or it makes people say, well, I'm not racist, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And what I think the work is about is actually soul searching and finding out how you may have been benefiting, or what those privileges might look like, or what implicit biases, and how it has impacted not just your life, but the life of those who are around you, especially our clients, right? and how we can make those changes. So in transitioning to the book, I'm hopeful that the book is actually looking at how people can tap into their own inner workings so that they understand just how important it is for them to kind of have a self-awareness of who they are and how they kind of represent sometimes oppression, even though they think that they are not oppressing others.
Right, right. Yes. The book does do that. I mean, I think the book focuses though on the fact that as counselors and our clients, students that we work with every day are a part of a systems, whether it be criminal justice systems, education systems, health systems that we've seen with the pandemic.
Right.
We're reminded of the inequities and the racial injustices within those systems. And this book is more about understanding structural and systemic systems that have worked together. One of the, I guess, one of those things that really upsets me sometimes, I used to think about a lot when I was a school counselor. I was an elementary school counselor. And I used to see young Black boys in my school lined up outside the principal's office after PE every day. And, they were third grade, fourth grade, lined up because they had supposedly had done something that they shouldn't have done during recess. And this had become an everyday occurrence.
Right.
And it was my job as the counselor to help them go back to recess. But what didn't sit right with me is that it wasn't these boys that had the problem. It was the adults and how they saw these boys within this education system. And so, is the counselor's job to just, help these boys be a part of the system that's working against them? The faulty assumptions about Black boys, that they're starting trouble, that they are about trouble, that they, aren't smart. They are somehow going to do something that, others are not going to like. I mean, it was all of these assumptions about, it was not a mistake that they were all Black boys.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that I see is that in counseling is that our job isn't just to acknowledge the cultural differences of these boys. Our job is also to name the systems and the racist ideas about who these Black boys are. And that's where this book comes in. It's not about the boys are the problem, it's the system is the problem. And it's the people who, perpetuate the system. And that is where this book comes in. My entire career, I've talked about the beauty of cultural difference. And I love that we live in a colorblind, that, the goal is for us not to be colorblind anymore. But it's also, our goal is to understand that our systems perpetuate oppressive outcomes.
Right. And I think about it, even as an adult, I was standing with one of my Black colleagues the other day, this is about a year or so ago, and we were standing and somebody in a really high position walked by us. We were standing like close to the hallway near a stairwell, and it was like, here comes trouble. And we looked at each other like, why is that acceptable? Right? We're just two colleagues talking in the hallway. Why is trouble attached to that? And so that's part of the systemic system, that people kind of see Black individuals as problematic. We have that joke that we have a lot of times where we're when there's a bunch of us gathered, we're like, hey, we better not hang out too close together because they're going to think we plotting something or we're up to something. So thank you for what you're bringing forth in the book, because I think that is really important. So how does one how do you want people to kind of experience the book? When they read the book, what is it that you want them to take away?
Well, the beauty of this book is that I edited the book and I do an introduction to the book and giving the context of this moment after what happened to George Floyd and many other Black men, Black women, women of color, men of color that have been a part of these faulty systems. So I build the case for why we need to focus on dismantling racism in our racist history, starting with chattel slavery in this country. We've had, racism has been what this country has been built upon. And so I start the book off, but there are 20 some authors of these wonderful chapters who have, are laying out their soul as far as how to be an anti-racist counselor.
Okay.
And those chapters are wonderful. There's a discussion from college and career readiness to how to do supervision through an anti-racist lens, how to take apart the counseling canon. What do we see as counseling? How does it sit within this racist structure? And so that is the chapters are by these wonderful authors who have done all of the work. I want people to start thinking about their work and how it does affect even the cultural competence work that we do. How does it not address issues of anti-Black racism? How does the work that we do not address these racist policies and systems? And so I believe that we can be culturally competent and be blind to these issues around racism. And so we're continuing to perpetuate the same outcomes because we're not dealing with the real inequities and the real racial structures that lift up racism. So that is the challenge.
You said something that was really, I think, powerful in that we can't just think that we're doing good stuff.
Right.
We have to be actively engaged in the work that we're doing.
And we have to name it. I mean, we have to name, we can't be quiet anymore either. I mean, there's a book out saying that we can't be just nice and kind counselors anymore to, challenge racism. Anti-racism is taking an active stance against racist ideas. It's not a comfortable stance to take because you're going against what the norm is. So it requires us to be a little tough and to create some discomfort. So I'm not going to be surprised when the book might create some discomfort. But again, I go back to the authors of the book. I mean, a lot of the authors, they invoke themselves. And they're really like personal essays about how they have experienced issues around race and racism, white counselor educators, practicing counselors. And the reason why I didn't want to just say school counseling, because I think schools are a part of communities. I am really tired of separating schools from schools are a part of communities. If we're not addressing the community issues, then we're not getting it right in schools because our kids are going home, they go into their communities and they come back into schools. So I purposefully titled the book Anti-Racist Counseling in Schools and Communities.
Well, that's a perfect segue for us to take a break. And we'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the essence of this book. So I'm Dr. Kent Butler, and this is the Voice of Counseling from the American Counseling Association. Our conversation will continue in a moment.
Counselors help positively impact lives by providing support, wellness, treatment. We're working to change lives. We are creating a world where every person has access to the quality, professional counseling, and mental health services needed to thrive.
Welcome back. I'm Kent Butler, and we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy. We left off with on a really high note in terms of talking about the book and the essence of the book. Cheryl, can you tell me a little bit about what's different about this book, this day, this time? Why now? How is it different than the work that people have been doing around social justice and multicultural counseling with regards to helping people see themselves or work with their clients. What's different about this particular book?
Yeah, I get that question a lot because this work around, anti-racism isn't a new term. It was first brought to light by Angela Davis, who's one of my
Yes.
heroes, and who talked about that it's not good enough to be not a racist. You have to be an anti-racist. And then a good colleague that was here with me at American University, Ibram Kendi, who has written even more about anti-racism. And in one of my first conversations with Ibram, it was, I told him, I said, boy, I've been talking about this for a while,
Right.
social justice issues and counseling and whatever. And, in my conversations with him, I realized that, the anti-racism work is a part of the social justice movement, right? But social justice is much wider. There are so many aspects of social justice. It can be social justice around LGBTQ issues. It can be social justice issues around immigration issues. And that's all good. We need that. We still need social justice advocacy and work.
Right.
The anti-racism, movement is all about seeing George Floyd on that street in Minneapolis. It's about Black and brown people being subjugated to criminal justice systems, education systems, health systems that ultimately do not give them a chance to thrive.
Yeah.
And so it's really about racism and the history of racism in this country, acknowledging that, naming it for what it is, and then actively working against it, changing those policies and those practices. And so it's a part of social justice advocacy, but there is a focus on fighting back and pushing back on our racist past.
Yes.
There's so many issues in education that are propped up by racist ideas about intelligence, who's smart and who's not, based on tests that are testing not based on a very Eurocentric sort of perspective and framework.
Can you kind of break that down? What does Eurocentric perspectives mean to you? When you say that, how does someone connect that to, the fact that it doesn't necessarily resonate with other populations?
Well, so this is part of the cultural responsiveness too, but we know that intelligence in this country was defined by white men to elevate intelligence in the eyes of white people and pretty much white men. And so those characteristics of, well, better yet, let me say it this way. In order to propel a society in which one group of people is perceived as being smarter than others, the tests, how we test and how we view intelligence had to align with the group that we want to propel as being superior in that area.
There you go. Thank you for that. That's a
simplistic
way of looking at how that kind of comes about.
And in our country, who were the people making those decisions were white European men. And so that's where this is coming from. The whole premise of anti-racism is that to be anti-racist is to see all groups as being equal.
Right.
And not to propel one group over another. So think about it in schools, we're categorizing and sorting kids every day according to these ideas about who's smart, who's gifted, who's, and that's where our work as counselors to disrupt that, to dismantle that and say that, this is wrong because we're not giving students, Black and brown students, an opportunity to thrive.
So I want to give you some kudos for something that you and American University did not too long ago. I had an opportunity to participate in the teach-in. You all had not too long ago, and you had a very phenomenal speaker there, Dr. Bettina Love, who talked about Abolitionist way of teaching. And can you talk a little bit about what that narrative was and that success that you had with that? Because that was with school counselors and others, but other people could look at that and really grow from that experience. Can you talk a little bit about what that teaching meant to you and
Oh, it
how
was
powerful it
wonderful.
was?
It was powerful to me. I've always dreamed of having a teach-in from the, reading about in the 60s and early 70s when there were teach-ins on the campuses of University of Michigan and Berkeley and other places where faculty would just teach about these issues that the country was struggling with around racism and issues about the war in Vietnam and what does freedom really mean? And these new ideas were generated at many of these teach-ins. So I'd read about these for years, and it was my dream to have a teach-in for counselors. And
Right.
so we had it. And Bettina Love, if folks haven't read her work around abolitionist teaching, you're missing out because it's wonderful. And her work is steeped in an anti-racist sort of grounding. And she calls it abolitionist because it's really freeing people from the chains and of educating in the same way.
The same way.
And she just really nailed it for us and gave us a really good kickoff. We intend to have that teach-in every year, and it's a chance for counselors, professional counselors, counselor educators, counselor advocates, people who are just interested in counseling and changing systems around counseling and in schools and communities to come together and share their ideas and their frustrations. Actually, what I think one of the most powerful parts of the day was counselors sharing their frustrations in trying to do this work and how difficult it is. And how do I look after myself when people are constantly telling me that I shouldn't be doing this work?
Right.
And often we forget that being, if you're promoting social justice, promoting cultural competence, promoting anti-racism in any field, people are going to take shots at you, right? I mean,
yes,
they are going to throw all kinds of stuff at you.
Right.
And it really does mean that we have to look after ourselves. And that piece of the day was very powerful. That, we have this community of people. You have your peeps. This is your community, but also take care of yourself.
The thing, you said people are going to throw stuff at you and you have to get your armor up and really be ready for this. This is not easy work.
No.
It's really something, I don't think anybody in their right mind would go into something and just go into this firestorm of the kind of criticism and other things that are coming up. But the flip of that is we're doing it for everybody. We're doing it for equity for all, right?
Yeah.
But yet people are so against it, it seems, because of mindsets that have been drilled into folks for eons. And so how do you break that cycle? The teach-in, is it available for people who have not been able to see it? Or is that something that people are able to still see?
Yeah, it's available, but you cannot see Bettina's, Dr. Love's part. But you can see the other parts, I believe, on our website for the Center for Post-Secondary Readiness and Success. There are snippets of the day. We're excited next year, having some other speakers and really maybe more than one day.
Are you doing it in person this time, or I know one of the things that we did this one
we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. It's
both ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice doing things virtually because people have more access, right?
More access,
instead of coming to DC for it. But we're thinking about, brainstorming how we can do it and maybe not just making it one day.
Right.
But let me just tell you, let me add on to what Bettina Love's work, why we chose her to be our speaker, not just because of her abolitionist teaching framework, but also because she talks about joy. And that this is all about love.
Right.
And all of us can relate to finding joy or wanting love. And, this notion that this work is not all about fighting others and pushing back and challenging. It's also about recognizing our love for one another and finding joy in this work. And that's what made, her work so suitable for what we wanted to accomplish in the teach-in. We wanted there to be togetherness, building community, and to really sit this bit of work within this overall feeling, love for one another, because that's really what justice is.
Right. So do you see the teaching as a something that taps into the book, or how do you see those two things kind of colliding with regards to
Well,
the work that you're
interestingly
doing now?
enough, I don't know if you knew this, but most of the authors from the book were also at the collective. I mean, we call ourselves a collective, a school
Right.
counseling collective.
Right.
And they are, those authors were a part of the organizing work group that put the teach-in together.
Nice.
And, you know, we came together organically. We were, you know, again, I keep going back to that summer of 2020 and just being overwhelmed with grief, but overwhelmed with just, we got to do something, right? I don't want to be helpless anymore. I want to do something.
Right.
And it was a group of counselor educators that just came together. We were just friends, you know, and we just said, let's get together and do this. And so we've been meeting, we meet every week or so. And the book came out of those conversations.
Beautiful.
And yes, it is beautiful. But it shows you the power of togetherness. And it goes back, Kent, to what we talked about at the beginning. We're stronger together.
Mm-hmm.
And these are big topics, you know, these are, I mean, we didn't become, you know, have these racist structures overnight. We're not going to get rid of them overnight.
Right.
So we need more people
Yeah.
to dismantle. And it's been beautiful to work with a diverse group of counselor educators who are coming at this in different ways, but have the passion and they have the commitment.
Yeah.
And so it's just been one of those things that I have just enjoyed in my career.
One of the questions I ask students when they are finishing their dissertation is, what did they learn about themselves? How have they grown through this process? Editing this book, you had to have had people in your head from various walks of life, reading through what they've shared. And how has that inspired or made you see yourself differently in this whole process and getting this book to be ready for production?
Well, I'm very humbled. I realize I don't know everything. I've learned through every chapter. I learned new things. I learned experiences that my colleagues had never shared with me. I learned about interdisciplinary connections between some of the work that folks were doing. I learned so much about how to think about counseling and what we're doing every day, and through their eyes. And so I think I'm a much smarter person as a result of editing this book, because I've learned so much from the chapter authors, but I'm also just humbled. Again, it goes back to, there's such brilliant people in the counseling profession.
Yeah.
And brilliant and passionate. And when you put brilliance and passion together, oh my God, it's like, wait, I mean, it's just wonderful.
And the people who are in the field who don't care who gets the credit, right? They just want to put the stuff out there to get
they just want the stuff out there,
thinking about it and changing the way that they're seeing it. So
yeah, it's our way of maybe possibly changing our world, changing our profession.
Yeah.
You know, I say in the book, I think in the introduction, that I became a counselor because of the power of counseling to change the world, right?
Right.
We're helping people problem solve, become better people. What better place to have this conversation around anti-racism than in counseling?
Which is so important.
So important.
So important. And so I think in terms of that, you know, so many times we wait for the savior to come. And, you know, we are the savior.
We are it.
We are the ones that we've been sitting here waiting for. And we can't wait for the Martin Luther King or the President Obama or whomever, Gandhi.
Or Kent Butler to come and save the day.
You can't wait for me to change the world.
Right.
We all are in this together in terms of the work that we need to be doing. And it's really important. And this book that you put forward, Anti-Racist Counseling in Schools and Communities, seems to be a gateway to people recognizing that. And I think what I would want to say is, read it with yourself out of the way, right? And what I mean by that is, read it for what the purpose of it is. Don't read it to try to make it be about you and now your guilt or you feeling uncomfortable, because these are people's truths.
Right.
These are things that people have gone through in life. So allow that to be what feeds you.
Right.
So that you can be making the changes that are necessary, as opposed to, I can't, I don't do that, or I don't do this. This is not don't read it verbatim as to this is what you've done in your life, but read it with the intentionality of knowing that I may be oppressing people. I may have had a hand in how this has been done to hurt other individuals. And that's kind of how you can read this without becoming guilty or fragility playing a part of what you have to now go through in order to kind of help change what we're talking about. We all have a vested interest in making sure that we all find equity for
Absolutely. Couldn't have said that better. And thank you for saying that. And you said that at the end of our teach-in too, which I think was very powerful, that we come to this work having to humble ourselves to listen, right?
Yeah.
To others' experiences. And I think that is so true. I think it's also important as you read this book, to read it with colleagues, to have book clubs around it, take each chapter and sort of read it. But it's also important to just breathe, okay? Just breathe, right? There's some tough things to hear, I think, in this book, and about, our profession possibly perpetuating some of these racist ideas. But we have to just sit and breathe and think and reflect. It's not about hating white people. Often we hear now the critical race theory, it's about hating white people or hating your country. No, it's about loving our country. And wanting it to be better. This is about loving our neighbors who are white, our friends who are white, but wanting our white friends and colleagues to understand the history of this country and what our lived experiences have been, and how counseling can help possibly fix and correct some of the damage that's been done. So that's it.
What brings up for me is that, yes, this is not about trying to make you feel bad about yourself.
No, it's not.
It's not. There's never been about that. And it's been about helping you see the world for what it is through the lenses of other individuals who haven't had the same type of experiences that you may have had.
Right.
And so you can't say that everybody has a right to, or they can do this, when you don't understand the disparities or the obstacles that have been in their way that stop them from being able to do this, right?
Right.
There's not just one person who can make it through, right? Oh, I'm so glad you made it out. You're an example for your community. No, there are many examples within the community who could do the same thing.
Absolutely.
But there's just too many roadblocks that are there in the way that stop them from being able to move forward.
Absolutely.
You have been a phenomenal person in my life. I appreciate you so much. We're coming to the end of our time together, but I really want people to go out and get this book. Like you said, start reading clubs and reading times with your colleagues and friends, and just really think about how you can contribute. Nobody says you have to do it all, but you can do some things that help make the changes that are necessary to break the barriers down, to help dismantle the racism that's there. And that's having a belief, right? You have it right behind you.
Believe. You see it? You see it?
There's a belief. Yes, I do. Right. You have to have a belief that you can help make an impact in the things that are necessary in this world. And I think this book is really something that's going to help us get there. So Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy.
Thank you, Dr. Kent Butler. Thank you so much. And I just want to, back at you. You are a phenomenal human being. Thank you so much for all that you're doing for everyone else in our field, by having these conversations, by opening yourself up to have these conversations, and opening yourself up to be a leader for us all. I just want to thank you. And this has been just a wonderful conversation. We got to do this again. It's just funny having this conversation on tape.
Yeah.
We usually have these just on the phone, right?
On the phone. Right. And there's nothing like how you say, people, we don't get nefarious or whatever that word is, where, people get there and say, oh, what are they talking about over there in the corner? No, this is really about impacting all of us for the better, right?
Yes.
We don't get there and, we don't sit and think about it. When we have time together, we're not sitting there trying to beat down people who are doing this bad stuff.
Right.
We are sitting here saying, okay, how can we make the changes? We know that they're there. We know that it's happening, but we're not focusing in on individual people. We're looking at the systemic system at play and how we can break down those barriers. And so
Absolutely.
Thank you all for being here today. Cheryl, I really appreciate you having the time to be here, to share your story, to put people on the direction of your book, and it's coming out through ACA. But from ACA also is the Voice of Counseling. And this is Dr. Kent Butler. Thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next time.
ACA provides these podcasts solely for informational and educational purposes. Opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the view of ACA. ACA is not responsible for the consequences of any decisions or actions taken in reliance upon or as a result of the information and resources provided in this program. This program is copyright 2021 by the American Counseling Association. All rights reserved.